All right, everyone, welcome back to another section on insect morphology. This is part 22, and today we're going to continue on with talking about internal anatomy, internal morphology, and internal organs with discussion about fat body. So, the fat body is interesting in that it's not like anything else in humans or in other vertebrates. So it's two words, fat body. Sometimes you'll see it as one word. And before we start getting into the pictures, fat body is a weird thing to look at because there's not a ton of structure and it's super variable between insects. So, for instance, if fat body in some like beetles and things, will look like a chain of pearls that kind of forms a net in between the organs. Sometimes it just looks like an amorphous mass of tissue, which is what you kind of expect when you talk about like human fat and stuff like that. It just looks like a blob. This is particularly common in caterpillars or insects with a lot of fat body, and generally speaking, larval insects have more fat body than adults do. And sometimes it'll just look like thin white strings kind of tucked around in the body. And it's present throughout the body of insects. So generally, with humans, we associate fat with your abdomen or your butt or things like that. But there's quite a bit in insects. There is quite a bit of fat in the abdominal regions, but there's also quite a bit of fat like stuffed in the head, around the brain, and the reason for that is fat body is not just fat in insects. So the fat it is an energy reserve, just like it is in mammals, and it does primarily store a bunch of lipids. But it also, so it stores lipids, it stores carbs, it stores protein, and it is also metabolically active. So it's metabolic tissue in that it actively creates more complex proteins, carbs, and lipids, and then secretes them into the hemolymph, into the hemocoel, so their version of blood. It also detoxifies. It also can store kind of waste products, so it acts as storage for other non energy products. It creates hormones. What else does it do? It is an intermediate. And by that, I mean it frequently other organs will secrete proteins or hormones or enzymes and send it to the fat body, and then the fat body will do something else to it and then re-secrete it into the blood. So it's kind of the intermediate glandular tissue in a lot of insects. It has a lot of functions. So there's not exactly a corollary for this in humans. The closest that you could say would be like it's a mixture of our body fat and our liver and some of our glands. It's not exactly one thing. Additionally, within an insect, you can have multiple forms of fat body depending on where in the body you're looking at it. So it's entirely possible that in the future, when we have a better understanding of the role of fat body, that there will it won't be considered one organ. It will be considered multiple organs depending on the structure and location, and maybe they'll eventually get their own names and things like that. One of the other things, before I forget, that this is really, if I can remember how to spell this, one of the things that it does that's really important is the creation of vitellogenin. So vitellogenin is the nutrient protein or nutrient complex that is used to fill insect eggs. So it's kind of like the egg yolk. And it is extremely important in the production of vitellogenin. This process is called vitellogenesis. And that is how this fat body is used to generate kind of these egg yolks for reproduction. So now that we've talked about kind of the theoretical version of of fat body, we can get into photos. So one of the things that I haven't really talked about a lot, because today we're going to actually look at actual dissection images. If for those of you who have never actually done a dissection or looked at a dissection, dissections are messy, extremely messy. So up to this point, I've been like doing drawings of insects for you guys, right? And it'll be like, here's an insect, and here's its eye, and on the inside you have like the gut, and maybe there'll be some fat. It's not super clear. So when you have like this silly sort of picture, it makes it seem really obvious, but once we start looking at the interior of insects, it's very messy, and I'll try and do my best to break down what it exactly is that we're looking at. So to start the discussion about fat body, we need to start talking about larval insects. And the reason we start talking about larval insects is because larvae tend to have a lot more fat body than adults. Part of that is because the larvae are much more metabolically active in that they're actively growing, they're actively synthesizing hormones and proteins to go through their growth process or their metamorphosis process. And part of it is that, especially in holometabolous insects, which are insects, I don't know if I've used that word for yet, holometabolous, holometabolous, is that how you spell it? Holometabolism is different from heterometabolism. Holometabolism means that they go through a complete metamorphosis, where they actually go like a caterpillar, where it goes egg to wormy caterpillar to pupa to butterfly. That is a holometabolous insect. A heterometabolous insect is something like more like a stink bug, where it goes to egg to small insect to larger version of same insect, where you don't go through this like larval and then pupal stage, where it's just like the insect gets bigger and grows wings. So that's heterometabolism. Holometabolism is going through the entire process of metamorphosis. So generally speaking, holometabolous insects have even more fat body. And the reason for that is they need to do all this eating during their larval stages and put down tons of fat, so that when they go through their pupal stage and they're not capable of eating, they have stored up fat for their metamorphosis. So when you're looking at many larval insects, if you're looking at white grubs or maggots or anything like that, a lot of different moth caterpillars, a lot of them just appear white. And the reason that they appear white is actually fat body. So their skin or their cuticle, their epidermis, their integument, whatever you want to call it, is actually clear in most cases, unless it's like heavily patterned or dark or something like that. In this case, their integument is clear, and these white sections you're seeing all over the body are fat body. And these dark sections that you're seeing are gut tissue. In these are white grubs, so this is a mixture of feces and soil. The dark parts are feces, and the white parts are fat body. So when you're looking at a white insect, you're really looking at the fat body. So now that you know that, when you look at this extremely white insect, you can see how much fat body it has. This is a beetle larva. So like I was saying, the larvae tend to have more fat body. You can see it's just an enormous a percentage of the body is covered in this fat body. Some of this white tissue that you're seeing kind of around the legs and in the thorax is muscle. Frequently in insects, the muscle will appear white or kind of a palish cream color, but the majority of this is fat body. So next time you look at a white bug, you'll realize, oh, actually that's just a glob of fat walking around. So when we cut one of these larvae open, generally what you will see in a larva is just gut and fat. So this next image here, this is a caterpillar that's been cut open. Cotton leaf worm, Spodoptera litoralis. And one of the things that you'll notice immediately is it's not super white. What you're actually seeing a lot here is green. Some of that is because caterpillars feed a lot on leaves, and they will have a lot of chlorophyll passing through their gut. So you will see quite a bit of green in a lot of these insects. But if we zoom in here, it's a little pixelated, but it's fine. What you're seeing here, this whole middle section here is midgut. So this is midgut. So it's part of the intestine, and the intestine goes up this way and back this way. These white ribbons that you're seeing, is that right? So yeah, this ribbon here, these sorts of ribbons around here, all of those ribbons are Malpighian tubules, which we've talked about a little bit. They attach to the gut at the pylorus, the pyloric sphincter, and they act kind of like the kidneys. They float around in the hemocoel, and they clean the hemolymph. So they're scrubbing the blood, as it were, kind of like kidneys. All of this on the interior is food and feces. And so then what you have here is you have a couple different layers of fat body. So let's move on to the next picture. So you can see like all of these ribbons here. This is Malpighian tubules. This is more gut. So these stringy things you see here are trachea, so part of the breathing system. But then all this white tissue you see, all of that is very amorphous fat body. So there's generally two different large locations in the actual thorax and abdomen of insects. You'll have kind of visceral fat body, or paravisceral fat body, which is pressed up against the organs. And then you'll have parietal fat body, which some of this white silvered stuff is parietal fat body, and some of it is trachea. Generally, if you see something that's very silvery in an insect, you're looking at a trachea of some sort. So then if you pull the gut out, so the gut in this has been kind of cut away here and here, all this space underneath the gut is full of amorphous fat body. So this is probably more like the paravisceral fat body. And then some of this darker stuff, this is all connective tissue. But the majority of the space in this caterpillar is taken up by this fat body. So this will look very different than what you would see in adult insect. Adult insects still have fat body, but they tend to have much less of it because they can actively consume. They're done with their metamorphosis. They're done with their growth. They're not going to go through another molt, which is also one of the reasons. Speaking of molts, one of the reasons that these larvae have so much fat body is the fat body actually helps produce ecdysone. It doesn't directly produce it, but it does. It acts as an intermediate and creates very active ecdysone. So if the insect is actively growing, it needs a lot of this fat body to help it achieve the next molt. So adults don't have to deal with that. So instead, they can get rid of a lot of this fat body. It's not efficient to be carrying this around all the time. So the next one we're going to look at is an adult cockroach. So in this cockroach here, so here's the head. This section here is the thorax. So the wings have been removed. That's the head. And then all of this is the abdomen. So we're going to zoom in here. So this is the abdomen. And there's quite a bit to look at in here. So the first thing you'll probably notice, or that you should notice, is the gut. So this dark section here that's all knotted around itself, this is the gut. And you can see it's full of food and feces. That's what all this dark coloration is. These sorts of silvered, let me make this thinner. These sorts of silvered, spidery, webby, ropes that you're seeing, these are all the trachea. So when you see like a clear tube with a silvered line in it, that's all trachea. So that's part of the breathing system. And you can see that there's a lot of trachea in an adult insect, especially one that runs really fast like a cockroach. It has to breathe a lot. But then in between the trachea and the gut, you will see these big globs of white. And these big globs of white are the fat body. And there's a lot of it paraviscerally around the gut. This sort of yellow stuff that you're seeing are attached to the gut. These are likely the Malpighian tubules. In cockroaches, the Malpighian tubules are very small. So these are like those kidney blood scrubbing tubules. They tend to be very small, and they tend to have a lot of them around the pylorus here. But all this white tissue that you're seeing is fat body. So in cockroaches, the fat body is used heavily for detoxification. It's one of the reasons that cockroaches are just so good at not dying from pesticides and things like that. They can actually sequester a lot of poison into the fat body, and then it can be neutralized through metabolic processes. So if they eat toxins or eat pesticide, they can frequently just overcome it through the sequestration into the fat body. So fat body is a really important tissue. I don't really want to call it an organ, although it probably is. But it is an amorphous tissue scattered throughout the body. If we were to cut open the thorax up here, you'd see even more of it. If we were to cut open the brain, you would see it surrounding the brain. It's just everywhere. So this is just a very basic introduction. A lot of stuff about fat body. If we wanted to go into in depth, it's more of a physiological discussion where you're going to talk about a lot of different chemical reactions, a lot of hormones that are present. But just from a morphological position, it's I don't want to say it's simple, but it's not super well understood, and it's not super obvious where it's like divided into clear organs on a morphological level. So this will suffice, I think, for now for an introduction to this, and I'll talk to you guys later.